All right, welcome back. So we've got some trades I'm going to go through here. First off, David Rittich has joined the Toronto Maple Leafs. David Rittich is an excellent goaltender who's had a really bad run in Calgary, and him being traded out of Calgary might be the best thing for him. Calgary retains 50% of his salary, and it's a 2022 third-round pick. Again, Toronto's all in. Draft picks, not this year, and apparently next year's are up for grabs too, and they're still reportedly in on Taylor Hall. So Toronto is just giving up on salary cap, which I'll talk about at the end of this, because there's an interesting thing that I think could come out of this. And Rittich, again, excellent goaltender. This means that if Anderson's out for a while, that's fine. I really think that for Rittich, getting out of Calgary will be good for him. And now they've got Rittich. They've got somebody that, they can put out there, and then they can only lose one to Seattle. So if Seattle takes Campbell, let's just say, okay, just wait, time out. Let's just say they protect Freddie. Let's just for giggles say they protect Freddie, and then you end up losing Campbell. I know. But Rittich, maybe Seattle would like Rittich more. So I'm just using that. Okay, I'm just using that as an example. And yeah, I think Toronto does well picking up Rittich, so I'm wearing a Toronto jersey on that. Now, there's also word that Jeff Carter's being traded to Pittsburgh, and rumors that maybe he's retiring at the end of this season. Now, the details are yet to be worked out. So I looked at this, and much like the Nick Deslauriers talk of him going to Pittsburgh, it's not gone through yet. Odds are Deslauriers still ends up being traded by Anaheim because he's a fantastic enforcer who can also play regular shift. And Carter in Pittsburgh makes a lot of sense. That would be a number 3 center for them, and Carter still has... he still has something in the tank. He's had a better year this year. I know the offense isn't great, but he's better this year than last year. He's had more time off, obviously, because LA wasn't involved in the return to play. I think he has more in the tank this year than he would have had if they'd, say, acquired him last year. So we'll see how it works out. Apparently, LA's agreed to some salary retention. There's some salary cap issues to be dealt with and figured out, and we'll talk about that as well later on in this video. So the details are yet to be worked out, but it looks like Pittsburgh's going to get Jeff Carter. Mike Reilly's been acquired by the Bruins. So the Bruins pick up a defenseman. It's a third rounder in 2022 they're giving up. I mean, I like Reilly. I do. When I saw this, I thought, oh, Reilly's going to get hurt. This is too bad. It's like somebody should be waiting for him at the door and be like, dude, you don't want to go in there. Every defenseman that goes in there, they don't come out the same. They come out with like a busted ankle or concussed, or they come out with a broken shoulder, or they're not the same, man. You can't go. It's like a horror movie now being a Boston Bruins defenseman. So I hope the best for Reilly. We'll see whether or not Sweeney keeps him around. It doesn't move the needle very much. Like it's a good depth defenseman to pick up, but it really doesn't move the needle. It doesn't mean that next game they've now got their power play back together. They've got their defense all sorted out. And I do worry about it being a third round pick. So I give Ottawa kind of a little bit of a lean on that, because the next year's draft is supposed to be pretty good and pretty deep. So a third round pick picked up by Ottawa, pretty smart move. And Ottawa also wasn't done with that. They trade Braden Coburn, who, remember, they waived. The Islanders pick him up, and it's a 2022 7th round pick going to Ottawa. So for the Islanders, this is just insurance for the playoffs. Smart move, insurance for the playoffs for the Islanders. Look for this kind of move to be made by Lou Lamoriello. Not anything big. He's made the big move with Palmieri and Zajac. Now it's just about getting other pieces to make sure that you've got that depth, right? Now, coming back to Pittsburgh. The plan with Pittsburgh is, to basically make it so that you don't have to worry about going over the cap. And they expect Malkin, Kapanen, and Tanev all back before the playoffs. Those are 3 players they expect back. So they can spend, they have some money to spend, but they have to watch, because you don't want to go over the cap before the season's out. And in the playoffs, there is no salary cap. Which brings me to my next point. Tampa Bay's had to play without certain players. Vegas has had this issue as well, where you're over the cap. You can't put everybody on the ice. When they win that way, does it tell other teams, just go over the cap? Because if your team is over the cap, what happens is you're playing a player down, right? You have to take somebody out of the lineup so that what you have on the ice is cap compliant. So maybe what we're learning here is teams can just go over. At this time of year, just go over. And then, in the playoffs, you don't have a salary cap, so you can put whoever you want on the ice. Again, this is something that owners have to agree to pay that money. GMs have to agree that it's fine. And for the NHL, I don't think that there's any reason for them to step in and get mad about it. If teams want to play shorthanded and have a better lineup in the playoffs, then I don't think the NHL is necessarily going to care. As long as the roster that's on the ice is cap compliant, I don't think they really have any concerns there. But yeah, that's a fascinating thing. And then apparently tonight, so the Caps and Bruins game was completely out of control. It was 8-1. So of course I'm watching the Rangers and the Islanders, which is close. I'm watching too to see if the Devils can complete a comeback against Pittsburgh. And so I'm not really paying much attention to Boston, Washington. Apparently, Jack Edwards is trending right now on the Canadian side of the border because it was on Sportsnet. And Sportsnet will show the NESN feed, which means that I don't have access to the other feed. I don't have the access to the Caps feed because when the NESN feed's on Sportsnet, they don't offer the other feed on NHL Center Ice. And apparently he had a meltdown in the last 5 minutes of the game, which doesn't necessarily surprise me. I have talked before about how hard it is sometimes to watch Bruins games with Jack Edwards, and it can get really tough. And it's too bad because I like Brick. I think Andy Brickley is one of the funnier color guys in the league. Not Mickey Redmond funny because nobody's Mickey Redmond funny. Nobody. Daryl Ray's close, but Mickey Redmond funny is right up there. And yeah, I don't really enjoy watching the Bruins games in general because he can be so over the top biased. Like it's so, you will hear that bias in a lot of color commentators. You really shouldn't hear it with the play-by-play announcer. You really shouldn't. The play-by-play announcer should sound as neutral as humanly possible. I know the bias is still going to come through, but not to that extent. That extent is just absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, Jack Edwards is trending, and we'll see what happens there. Because again, with Edwards, you think his contract ends up with NESN. Do they keep him? And again, I don't know how long his contract is. I don't know what's going on. I know that too. The backstage interviewer Sofia Yurtskevich, love her. I've loved her. She was in Toronto. She did all the stuff on Sportsnet. She was great on there. I'm glad that she's doing well for Boston as well. And yeah, I mean they have a good crew. I think that Barry Peterson's a good guy as well. Like all of the other parts seem to be pretty good. Like I said, I really like Brick. I don't know. Edwards is interesting, and he's always seemingly trending. And yes, he will say sometimes awful things. Sometimes they're taken a little bit out of context, but then he never answers it properly either. Now, apparently Taylor Hall is going to get moved tomorrow. There's 3 teams rumored to be in the mix. That's what Drager's reporting. Others are reporting as well. There's 3 teams in the mix for Taylor Hall. And he's about the biggest piece that we're going to see moved. A lot of these moves don't really change a lot. Like for Toronto, having Rittich just means that now Hutchinson becomes number 4 when everybody's healthy. Carter, he's that third line piece for Pittsburgh. Reilly's a depth defenseman who will be asked to play top 4 minutes right now for Boston because they don't have anybody. And yeah, the Islanders pick up Coburn, which is depth. So again, I don't think this changes Stanley Cup predictions. I think this deadline is probably going to move the needle less. I think that Toronto's done some good things today to augment their lineup, add some experience, and fix where there were some weaknesses in that lineup. And we'll see next month, just how well these things have worked. Because until the playoffs start, we can have all these debates, which are fun. But hey, and again, the better these guys do, the more hits hockey channels tend to get. There's a reason that Sportsnet, TSN report on Toronto all the time. It is a generated hit maker. It is generated to get you the most clicks in Canada. And it's a big part of the reason why I ended up having a hockey channel, because I noticed there was a lot of teams that weren't getting coverage. So there you go. But I'm not crazy. I know that if the Leafs go on a run this year, if they go all the way to the semis or they go to the Stanley Cup final, view counts on this channel will go through the absolute roof. So when people say, well, Shannon just wants Toronto to fail. Not really, no. Not really, no. I know there's certain teams that when they do well, I may personally cheer for them doing well, but I know that in terms of the channel, it's actually going to hurt my views when they do well. Boston's an example of where if they're doing really well, I've noticed that the views, because people are like, I forget this, I'm turning this off. And that's just kind of out there. So, yeah, personally, as a hockey fan, I might be happy, but I might be thinking in the back of my mind, Boston beating Toronto is probably gonna hurt the counts on everything going forward. So there's a business side to this, and I've basically stated for the last couple of years it makes a big difference. When you're covering every team as much as I do, you don't cheer as much for the teams as you cheer for players, and you don't care what jersey they're wearing. So that's why I talk a lot about players that I really like, and it doesn't matter where they are. So like in Pittsburgh, love Colton Sevier, can't believe he was waived. Glad he got 2 goals tonight. So that kind of thing. All right, hope everybody has a good night. Hope everybody rests up. Hopefully that's the end of the trades for at least tonight. I'll be up early tomorrow, ready to do trade videos. And of course, we have the trade deadline live stream as well. So I'll be all set to go for that. I don't know that there's going to be a lot of trades tomorrow morning because it feels like they're all happening now. These are all the kind of trades that we see on deadline day with an hour to go, right? So it kind of feels like every team's getting ready right now, and maybe we won't see that much. But there's always some that trickle out too after the deadline, where they line up and they're making that phone call to the NHL. And as long as they're in the queue to make that call, it counts. So even if it's afternoon, noon here is the deadline, 3 p.m. Eastern is the deadline, it can still go through. You still get trades after the deadline because they're on the phone waiting to talk to the NHL. All right. Thank you guys so much for all your support. The channel views have been really high the last couple of days in part because of this. So thank you guys so much for that. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. And tomorrow's going to be crazy because normally when you have trade deadline, there's 1 game that day. Tomorrow, there's 8. So it's a busy day in the NHL, and that's something that we have to consider as well. There are teams and players right now on those teams that over the last couple of days have been playing where they probably wouldn't be, or have been sitting out, and so their teammates are affected, where during a normal trade deadline, the schedule's actually a lot lighter, with that in mind that players are going to be distracted by the deadline. They don't admit it at the time, but they admit it after. So, yeah, we'll see once the deadline is passed. We should get a real good picture for who's ramping it up heading into the playoffs. And I'm looking forward to watching, and I'm looking forward to watching it with you. Thanks again for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.